The night split open with the sound of my wife's scream, sharp, ragged, and terrifyingly real. One moment, she was standing in the kitchen. The next, she collapsed against the counter, clutching her chest, her breath rasping like it was being stolen from her lungs. My heart froze, but my body moved on instinct. I grabbed the phone, calling emergency services, my voice shaking as I shouted our address into the receiver. Red and blue lights painted the driveway within minutes, sirens wailing against the stillness of our suburban street. 2 paramedics rushed inside, equipment bags slung over their shoulders, their faces locked with professional urgency. I pointed toward the kitchen, words stumbling out of me. "It's my wife. She can't breathe." They didn't hesitate, kneeling beside her, oxygen mask strapped over her mouth, heart monitor snapping awake with jagged beeps. But before relief could settle in, another set of lights approached. Not from an ambulance, but from a white SUV crawling up the cul-de-sac. The vehicle stopped at the curb, and out stepped Margaret Sloan, president of our HOA, clipboard in hand, jaw clenched like a soldier marching into battle. She didn't even look at my wife lying on the floor. Instead, she scanned the paramedics like intruders. "You can't park there," she barked, pointing at the ambulance blocking the street. "This is a violation of community policy. Emergency or not, rules are rules." One of the medics barely glanced up, sweat dripping down his temple. "Ma'am, this is a medical emergency. Please step aside." But Margaret wasn't moving. She pulled out her phone, her voice dripping with false authority. "If you don't relocate that vehicle immediately, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." My chest burned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wife's life was slipping away in front of me, and this woman was more concerned about a parking violation. I stepped forward, fists trembling, my voice raw with fury. "Are you out of your mind? My wife is dying." Margaret's eyes narrowed, and for a chilling moment, she turned her phone toward me. "Then maybe it's you I'll have arrested, interfering with HOA authority as grounds for removal from this neighborhood." The paramedics ignored her, working fast, but every second wasted in argument felt like another nail in a coffin. The air was electric with chaos, sirens fading into the distance, oxygen hissing from its tank, my wife's faint pulse fluttering like a candle about to go out. And standing there, watching Margaret dial the sheriff, I realized this night wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about war. The screech of tires cut through the night as a patrol car rolled into view, headlights washing over the ambulance and Margaret's smug figure. My stomach knotted. Of all the times for the sheriff to show up, it had to be now, with my wife's fragile breaths counting down like a clock we couldn't stop. Deputy Carson stepped out first, his boots crunching against the gravel, hand resting on his holster like the world was already guilty. He scanned the scene, the paramedics crouched over my wife, me kneeling at her side, Margaret waving her clipboard like a sword, and immediately turned toward her. "What's the situation, ma'am?" Margaret straightened, shoulders squared. "Officer, these so-called paramedics are obstructing traffic and violating HOA safety regulations. I demand you remove them at once." The deputy's eyes flicked toward me, cold and cautious. "Sir, is that true? Did you call them without authorization?" My voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. "Authorization? She's dying. My wife's heart is failing, and you're asking about HOA approval." The lead medic cut in, voice firm but calm. "Officer, we're mid-rescue. Her vitals are unstable. Every second matters." But Margaret wouldn't relent. She tapped her clipboard, venom in her tone. "This community thrives on order. If we let exceptions slide, chaos follows. He knows the rules. No emergency vehicles without prior notice." Something inside me snapped. I stood, the veins in my neck tight, the world blurring with rage and fear. "Listen to me. If you touch those medics, if you stop them, my wife will die right here in front of all of us, and her blood will be on your hands." For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy, broken only by the hiss of the oxygen mask and the steady beep of the monitor. Deputy Carson hesitated, conflict flickering in his eyes, but Margaret's voice pressed in like a knife. Do your duty. Arrest him for obstruction. The HOA has jurisdiction. Jurisdiction. The word echoed like a curse. I looked at my wife, her face pale and damp with sweat, her fingers twitching against mine. I couldn't let this stand. Not tonight. Not ever. I moved closer to the deputy, lowering my voice, forcing steel into my tone. You're a lawman. Look at her. You know the law doesn't belong to Margaret. It belongs to justice, and justice means saving a life. The deputy shifted, jaw tight, uncertainty written across his face. For the first time, Margaret's confidence cracked. But whether he'd choose the badge or her clipboard, that was the question burning in the night. The silence was suffocating. Every eye was locked on Deputy Carson, his hand hovering near his radio, his stance tense as if the ground itself might collapse. My wife let out a weak groan, her body jolting under the paramedics' desperate efforts. The beeping monitor quickened, sharp and urgent, like a countdown that refused to pause. Finally, the deputy took a step forward. My heart thudded, but instead of moving toward the medics, he turned toward me. His voice was low, steady, but heavy with intent. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. Let us handle this properly. Margaret's face lit with victory. She folded her arms, smirking like a queen watching her decree unfold. You see, the law is on our side. I couldn't hold back anymore. I stepped closer, my voice trembling but fierce. On your side? While my wife dies? You've lost your humanity, Margaret. The lead paramedic suddenly shouted, breaking the standoff. She's crashing. I need clearance to move her to the ambulance now. The room spun. Time fractured. My wife's chest heaved as the oxygen mask slipped, her pulse dropping like stones in water. Panic clawed at my throat. I turned back to Carson, my voice raw. If you stop them, you're not an officer. You're an accomplice. The deputy froze, torn. Margaret snapped like a whip. Enough. Arrest him, Carson. That's an order. But this time, something inside me refused to break. I grabbed the stretcher handles myself, locking eyes with the paramedic. Do it. Get her out. I'll clear the way. The medics didn't hesitate. They lifted her fragile body, rolling her fast toward the front door. Margaret lunged forward, blocking their path, clipboard raised like a shield. You're not authorized to take her. I stepped between them, my voice a roar that shook the night. If you touch her, Margaret, I swear you'll regret it. For the first time, she faltered, eyes wide, her power cracking under the weight of my fury. The deputy's hand twitched at his holster, but his gaze wavered, caught between duty and conscience. The stretcher wheels thundered down the steps, the paramedics racing toward the ambulance. My wife's hand dangled limp over the side, pale against the flashing lights. I sprinted after them, every muscle burning with fear and determination. Behind me, Margaret screamed, her words drowned by the blare of the siren. Carson's voice barked into his radio, urgent and conflicted. And as the ambulance roared to life, tires screeching against pavement, I knew the fight wasn't over. The HOA had declared war, and I was done playing defense. The ambulance tore down the street, red light strobing across dark windows, carrying my wife into the night. I followed close behind in my truck, every second stretched into eternity, my hand strangling the steering wheel as if sheer will could keep her alive. The paramedics' radio chatter crackled through the thin glass, fragments of medical codes I barely understood, each one a reminder she was still balanced between life and death. At the hospital, sterile lights blinded me as they wheeled her inside. Wait here, a nurse ordered. But waiting felt impossible. My chest ached with helplessness, my mind replaying Margaret's cold smirk, Carson's hesitation, the way bureaucracy nearly stole my wife's breath. Hours bled together. Finally, a doctor emerged, his expression serious yet softened with relief. "She's stable." The oxygen and quick response saved her. "You got her here just in time." My knees buckled, gratitude flooding through me like fire and water colliding. But relief quickly gave way to resolve. Because even as my wife fought for her life, Margaret had tried to turn that night into a battlefield over control, and I wasn't going to let it end there. The next morning, I drove back into the neighborhood. The cul-de-sac was quiet, sun filtering through manicured trees that suddenly looked less like home and more like prison bars. A small crowd gathered near the HOA office, whispers passing like wildfire. Margaret stood at the center, clipboard clutched tight, her composure cracked but not broken. I didn't wait. I climbed the steps, voice steady but sharp enough to cut glass. "Last night, my wife almost died because you cared more about your rules than her life. That ends now." Her jaw tightened. "This community functions on order. Without it." I cut her off, stepping closer. "Without compassion, it's not a community. It's a cage. And you proved that when you tried to have her arrested mid-rescue." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. Carson appeared at the edge, no longer certain which side he stood on. I held the room with one truth no rule could erase. The HOA isn't above humanity. You nearly killed her, Margaret, and if it weren't for those medics ignoring your orders, she'd be gone. That's not leadership. That's tyranny. The silence afterward was louder than any siren. Margaret's hand shook against her clipboard. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not of me, but of losing the power she'd built her life around. And in that moment, I knew something had shifted. The rules had shattered. The war was over. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more dramatic stories like this. Your support means the world.